Welcome to the deep dive. You're here because you want to get smart fast. And today we're doing just that, focusing on azithromycin.
That's right, a really common antibiotic, one many people have probably encountered.
Exactly. So we've gone through a ton of material, scientific reviews, market reports, clinical trial data, even patents.
All the good stuff.
Our mission today, to really unpack azithromycin, its history, how it works, what it's used for, and its wider impact.
Think of it as the essential guide. We'll cover the science, the story, and, well, some of the controversies too.
Okay, let's jump right in. The history. Where did this drug actually come from? It wasn't like an ancient discovery, right?
No, not at all. It's actually relatively modern. Discovered in the late 1970s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, by a Croatian pharmaceutical company called Pliva. But the interesting part is it wasn't built from scratch.
How so?
It's what we call a semi-synthetic derivative. It's based on an older antibiotic, erythromycin A, which had been around since the early 1950s.
Ah, so they were trying to improve on something that already existed.
Precisely. Erythromycin worked, but it had some drawbacks. One big one was instability in stomach acid, meaning it could get broken down before your body fully absorbed it.
Right, less effective then.
And it wasn't quite as good against certain types of bacteria, particularly some gram-negatives. So Pliva scientists were looking for ways to tweak the erythromycin molecule to overcome these limitations.
Clever. And they succeeded, obviously.
They did, and they were smart about it too. They secured pretty broad patent protection for their new compound, azithromycin.
Which turned out to be a very valuable move, I imagine.
Hugely valuable, because in 1986, they struck a licensing deal with Pfizer.
Ah, Pfizer. That explains the global reach.
Exactly. Pfizer marketed it as Zicramax pretty much everywhere except Central and Eastern Europe, where Pliva kept the rights. That partnership really transformed azithromycin from a promising discovery into a blockbuster drug.
It's a classic story of innovation meeting market power.
It really is. Shows how both discovery and strategic business decisions are needed to get important medicines out there.
Okay, so we know when and who. Let's get into the how. How does azithromycin actually fight off bacteria? What's the mechanism?
Right. So azithromycin is classified as a macrolide antibiotic. Its main job is to stop bacteria from making proteins.
Proteins are essential for bacteria, right? For growth and everything else.
Absolutely essential. Think of a bacterium having a little factory inside it to build proteins. Azithromycin jams up a key piece of that factory's machinery.
Which piece is that?
It specifically binds to something called the 50S ribosomal subunit. By sticking there, it basically prevents the factory from assembling proteins correctly. No proteins, no growth, no multiplication.
Like throwing a wrench in the works.
Exactly like that. It doesn't usually kill the bacteria outright. It mostly stops them from growing bacteriostatic, we call it.
Okay. Now, the sources mention cross-resistance with erythromycin. What does that mean for us?
That's a really important point, especially now. It means if bacteria figure out a way to resist erythromycin, that same trick often works against azithromycin too.
Why is that?
Because they're so similar chemically, and they target basically the same spot on that ribosome. So a change the bacteria makes to protect itself from one often protects it from the other. It's a major issue with antibiotic resistance.
Got it. Something else that stood out was its pharmacology, how it gets taken up by our own cells, like white blood cells.
Yes, this is one of azithromycin's quite unique features. Its chemical structure, this dual-base thing it has, allows it to be actively transported into certain human cells. Fibroblasts, white blood cells like phagocytes.
And why is that useful?
Well, think about where infections happen. White blood cells naturally travel to those sites to fight the bacteria. So if the azithromycin hitches a ride inside these white blood cells, it gets delivered in high concentrations right to the battlefield, so to speak, directly to where the bacteria are causing problems.
That's pretty smart drug design, or maybe a beneficial property they discovered.
It's certainly a key part of its effectiveness, and it's not just about killing bacteria directly.
What else does it do?
There's growing evidence for immunomodulatory effects. It seems to be able to influence our immune system's response.
Like calming down inflammation.
Exactly. It can reduce the production of certain pro-inflammatory signals, cytokines. This can be really helpful in conditions like, say, lung infections, where excessive inflammation can actually cause more damage. So it fights the bugs and helps manage the body's reaction.
A double whammy, almost.
Sort of, yeah. It adds another layer to its therapeutic benefit, especially in respiratory diseases.
Okay, that makes sense. So with all that in mind, what are the main things azithromycin is actually prescribed for? The list seems pretty long.
It is quite broad spectrum. It's definitely a go-to for community-acquired pneumonia CAP. Both oral and IV forms are used there.
Okay.
Also, acute bacterial sinusitis, those really nasty sinus infections. Pharyngitis or tonsillitis like strep throat, especially if someone can't use penicillin or the other first-line options.
Right, as an alternative.
Yes. And uncomplicated skin infections. Then there's a whole range of sexually transmitted infections.
Ah, yes, that comes up a lot.
Definitely. For non-gonococcal urethritis and cervicitis, often caused by chlamydia, it's famous for that single 1-gram dose. Super convenient.
One dose and done.
For that specific indication, yes. Makes adherence much easier. For gonorrhea, it's a bit different now due to resistance. It usually requires a higher single dose, 2 grams, and it's almost always given with another antibiotic, like ceftriaxone.
Because resistance is a big problem with gonorrhea.
A huge problem. Using 2 drugs helps combat that. It's also used as a single dose for chantroid, another type of genital ulcer disease.
And I saw something about Mycobacterium avium complex, MAC.
Yes, that's important, especially for people with compromised immune systems, like advanced HIV. Azithromycin is used both for preventing MAC infection, usually at 1,200 milligram dose once a week, and for treating active MAC infection, typically 600 milligram daily, as part of a multi-drug regimen.
Wow. And even eye drops.
Yep, for bacterial conjunctivitis. Azicite is a common brand name for the ophthalmic solution. It really does cover a lot of ground.
It certainly does. Now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, azithromycin got a lot of attention, didn't it? Often mentioned with hydroxychloroquine.
It absolutely did. There were some early small studies, often in vitro or observational, that suggested it might have some antiviral activity or could potentially help, maybe synergistically with hydroxychloroquine.
But that didn't really pan out in larger trials.
Largely no. Subsequent, much larger, well-controlled clinical trials, like the recovery trial in the UK or the action trial for outpatients, generally found no significant clinical benefit for azithromycin in treating COVID-19 patients, especially those who weren't severely ill.
So the initial hype didn't match the rigorous evidence later on.
That's a fair summary. It highlights how science works. Initial observations need to be tested robustly. There was also some real-world data, like a study from India mentioned, suggesting it helped with upper respiratory symptoms over 5 days, but that's different from proving an effect against the virus itself.
Right. And I see notes about potential synergy with other antibiotics against biofilms. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, biofilms are these slimy layers bacteria form, making them harder to treat. There's some research looking if combining azithromycin with drugs like tigecycline could be more effective against these resistant structures. Still early days for some of that, though.
And off-label use in pediatric ICUs, any major concerns there?
Well, off-label use always requires careful consideration, but one study we saw indicated that in that specific setting, it didn't seem to increase the risk of serious adverse events compared to its approved uses, but again requires careful judgment by the clinicians.
Okay, let's shift to how the body handles it. Pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics. You mentioned the long half-life earlier.
Right, that's a key pharmacokinetic feature.
Yeah.
Its half-life is quite long, which allows for that once-daily dosing and often shorter treatment courses, like the famous 3-day or 5-day Z-Pak.
Makes it easier for people to take all their medicine.
Definitely a plus for adherence. Another key point is its distribution. Even though oral bioavailability, the amount that actually gets into your bloodstream when you take a pill, is only around 38% compared to IV.
Which sounds low.
It is relatively low compared to some drugs, but azithromycin has this fantastic ability to penetrate tissues extensively. Concentrations in tissues like lung tissue or those white blood cells we talked about can be much, much higher than the concentration just floating around in your blood plasma.
So it gets where it needs to go, even if not all of it gets into the blood initially.
Exactly. That tissue concentration is crucial for fighting infections located in those tissues. As for getting rid of it, it's primarily metabolized or processed by the liver and then eliminated mainly through bile into the feces.
Okay, so how do they actually make this stuff? It's not like baking cookies, I assume.
Definitely not. Pharmaceutical manufacturing is pretty complex. For drugs like azithromycin, it's typically done using batch production.
Batch production, meaning they make it in large separate loads.
Precisely. It involves multiple chemical reaction steps, starting usually from that erythromycin A precursor. Then there are critical stages like crystallization, where the drug forms into solid crystals, and purification, often involving filtration and washing, to get rid of impurities and isolate the pure azithromycin.
And the sources mentioned that the chemical transformation from erythromycin to azithromycin requires strong reaction conditions.
Yes, some of the chemical steps involved can be quite harsh, maybe requiring specific temperatures, pressures, or reactive chemicals. Controlling these conditions precisely is vital for safety and also for ensuring you get a good yield of the desired product without too many unwanted side products.
Sounds like scaling that up from a lab bench to giant factory vats would be a challenge.
It absolutely is. That's process chemistry and chemical engineering. You need large, specialized reactors, often stirred tanks. Some might need vacuum systems. Then specific equipment for crystallization to control the crystal size and shape, which can affect how the drug dissolves later. And robust filters, like filter presses, to separate the solid drug from liquids.
And they're always trying to make the process faster and more efficient, right?
Constantly. Optimizing reaction times, improving yields, minimizing waste, ensuring consistent purity. That's the name of the game in pharmaceutical manufacturing. It's a highly regulated and controlled environment.
Speaking of regulated, let's talk about the regulatory side and maybe some of the bumps in the road. It got FDA approval for lots of uses.
Yes, it went through the standard FDA approval process for its various indications and dosage forms, tablets, suspensions, IV injections.
But then generics came along. How did that change things?
Massively. Once Pliva's and Pfizer's patents expired, other companies could get approval to make generic azithromycin. To do that, they have to demonstrate bioequivalence.
Meaning their version X the same in the body as Zithromax.
Essentially, yes. Same rate and extent of absorption. They also have to show their inactive ingredients are safe. The result was a dramatic drop in price and a huge increase in access. Generics dominate the market volume now.
But it hasn't all been smooth sailing. There have been safety concerns raised, particularly about the heart.
Yes, that's been a significant point of discussion and ongoing surveillance. Several large observational studies and meta-analyses have suggested a potential link between macrolide antibiotics, including azithromycin, and a slightly increased risk of cardiovascular events.
Like what kind of events?
Primarily ventricular arrhythmias, irregular heartbeats originating in the lower chambers of the heart, and, in some studies, a small increased risk of sudden cardiac death, or overall cardiovascular death, particularly when compared to no antibiotic or perhaps penicillin derivatives. Some data also hinted at a slight increase in heart attack risk.
That sounds serious. Did regulators act on this?
Yes. The FDA, for example, issued a drug safety communication back in 2013. They highlighted a specific study published in the New England Journal of Medicine that suggested a higher risk of cardiovascular death in patients taking a 5-day course of azithromycin compared to amoxicillin or no antibiotic.
But they also noted limitations with that study.
They did. It was an observational study, not a randomized controlled trial, which means it can show associations but can't definitively prove cause and effect. It relied on death certificate data, which can sometimes be inaccurate, and it focused on an outpatient population. So there was context.
And this relates to the QT prolongation issue.
Exactly. Azithromycin, like other macrolides, is known to have the potential to prolong the QT interval on an electrocardiogram.
Which is a measure of the heart's electrical recharging time.
Correct. If that interval gets too long, it can increase the risk of a dangerous arrhythmia called torsades de pointe. This risk is higher in people who already have QT prolongation, low potassium or magnesium levels, a slow heart rate, or who are taking other drugs that also prolong the QT interval.
So doctors need to be aware of patient risk factors.
Absolutely. It's a known risk that needs to be managed. There have also been reports of other potential issues, like hepatotoxicity, liver injury, though that seems rare, and reports of infantile hypertrophic pyloric stenosis, a stomach muscle thickening in newborns treated very early in life. Also, possible worsening of myasthenia gravis.
And inevitably, antibiotic resistance.
The big one. Because azithromycin has been used so widely, often very conveniently, it has unfortunately driven the development of resistance in many bacteria.
We mentioned gonorrhea earlier. Where else is resistance a concern?
It's a growing problem in Streptococcus pneumonia, a common cause of pneumonia and ear infections. Also in Mycoplasma genitalium, another STI, and even in common bacteria causing respiratory infections. It limits the drug's usefulness over time.
The COVID situation probably didn't help, with lots of potentially inappropriate use.
Likely not. Our sources mentioned concerns from Italy, for instance, where widespread azithromycin use during the pandemic, often for a viral illness, might have accelerated resistance development. It really emphasizes the need for antibiotic stewardship using these drugs only when necessary.
And there are even restrictions on using it in animals we eat.
Yes, off-label use in food-producing animals is restricted in many places due to concerns about drug residues getting into the food supply and potentially contributing to resistance in bacteria that could affect humans.
Okay, let's look at the money side. Azithromycin was a monster hit for Pfizer, right?
Oh, absolutely, a true blockbuster. Peak annual sales were somewhere around $2 billion back in 2005. Huge numbers.
But generics changed that picture dramatically.
Completely. Once generics entered the market, branded Azithromycin sales plummeted. That's the typical life cycle. But the overall market for azithromycin remained huge, just shifted to lower-priced generics.
So, more accessible, less profitable for the original maker.
Pretty much. Key players now include Pfizer still, but also major generic companies like Teva, Mylan, now Viatris, Indian companies like Zydus Cadila, Lupin, Chinese manufacturers. It's a global market. Rising awareness of infections keeps the demand strong.
How does it stack up in terms of cost effectiveness?
It depends heavily on what you're treating and what you're comparing it to. That single-dose regimen for chlamydia was often considered very cost-effective, mainly because you could be pretty sure the patient took the full treatment course, potentially avoiding complications and further spread. For other infections, the comparisons get more complex.
And its impact goes beyond just treating individual infections into public health.
Definitely. This is a really important aspect. Azithromycin has been absolutely crucial for global efforts against neglected tropical diseases.
Like trachoma.
Yes, trachoma especially. It's a leading cause of preventable blindness. Mass drug administration programs, often involving donations of azithromycin, like through the International Trachoma Initiative, supported by Pfizer for many years, using single-dose therapy, have made incredible progress towards eliminating trachoma in many parts of the world. It's also used for yaws eradication efforts.
So its single-dose efficacy and availability have had a massive global health impact.
Unquestionably. It's also been studied quite extensively, actually, for reducing overall child mortality in high-mortality settings in Africa and Asia, given periodically to young children. Some trials showed significant reductions in death rates.
Wow, that's huge. Shifting slightly, what about its cultural impact? The Z-Pak is almost a brand in itself.
It really is. That term became synonymous with a short, convenient course of antibiotics. It represented ease of use.
But maybe too convenient. Did it contribute to overuse?
That's the concern many people raise. The sheer convenience and widespread availability might have lowered the threshold for prescribing or requesting antibiotics, potentially for conditions like colds or bronchitis where they wouldn't help, because those are usually viral.
Leading to that resistance problem we discussed.
It's all interconnected. Increased awareness of antibiotic resistance is, in part, a consequence of the era of widely used convenient antibiotics like azithromycin. And when supplies run short, like the recent issues in Germany affecting STI treatment.
Right, I saw that.
It really underscores how reliant public health systems have become on having these key antibiotics readily available. Shortages can have immediate, serious consequences.
So wrapping this all up, it's been quite a journey for azithromycin.
Absolutely. From an innovative improvement on an older drug, becoming this incredibly widely used tool for everything from common infections to major global health campaigns.
But also facing significant challenges, the heart risks, the ever-growing threat of resistance.
It truly exemplifies the double-edged sword of powerful antibiotics. An amazing tool, but one whose effectiveness we constantly risk losing if we're not careful.
Its story really forces us to think about how we develop, use, and protect these vital medicines.
It does. The benefits have been immense, but the challenges are real and demand ongoing attention.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, our listeners. Considering this rise of resistance, not just for azithromycin, but across the board, how do we strike that critical balance? How do we ensure access to life-saving antibiotics while simultaneously preserving their power for the future? It's not just a question for scientists or doctors, but for all of us, something to really mull over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.